I'm gonna start by acknowledging the fact that this sounds like a shipping video, but I assure you, it is not. I just feel like there are so many moments where the strange relationship between Albus Dumbledore and Sirius Black is put on such a glaring display, and it just doesn't get talked about enough. Sirius spends 12 years in Azkaban, and no one at any point tries to get him out, which, given how very guilty he seemed at the time, fair. However, when he does get out of Azkaban, the best that Dumbledore can do is give him a cave. He's known to be one of the best duelists in the wizarding world, and all that they're gonna have him do is housekeeping in a world full of Polyjuice Potion, invisibility cloaks, yes, there are multiple, disillusionment charms. We're just gonna shelf probably the third strongest duelist in the entire Order of the Phoenix. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself, so let's just get into it. Does Dumbledore hate Sirius? Today on Magical Theory, let's discuss. First off, I want to start with a particularly popular dark theory on the subject of Dumbledore and Sirius Black's relationship. The theory goes that Dumbledore knew of Sirius's innocence while he was in Azkaban, but allowed him to stay there due to the need for Harry to live with his only blood relatives, the Dursleys. Being named Harry's godfather would have meant that Harry's custody was instantly transferred to Sirius upon Lily and James's death. The problem with this lies with the old magic granted to Harry from Lily's sacrifice and the additional bond of blood charm cast upon baby Harry by Dumbledore. So long as Harry was underage and considered the home of a blood relative to be his primary residence, his protection would be absolute while under that relative's roof. While Voldemort may have been clever enough to come up with some loophole for Lily's protection alone, the combination of her sacrificial protection and Dumbledore's bond of blood charm would be absolute during the summers when Harry could not be under Dumbledore's watchful eye directly. Because Sirius would have taken custody of Harry while not being a blood relative, Dumbledore would not have been able to grant Harry this extra protection during the times when he would be the most vulnerable out in the world. In other words, Dumbledore had to ignore Sirius's terrible plight in Azkaban. Despite this being the most popular topic of discussion in the fanbase regarding Dumbledore and Sirius' relationship, I personally find it to be the least credible evidence of Dumbledore's dislike for Sirius. From the start, the theory argues that Dumbledore knew of Sirius's innocence, but I don't see how. It's known that Dumbledore is an incredibly powerful Legilimens, but Sirius was not given a trial, and Dumbledore had no real contact with him before getting sent to Azkaban. There wouldn't have been a chance for Dumbledore to read Sirius's thoughts and learn of his innocence. The theory also suggests that Sirius's lack of trial doesn't make sense when compared to the trials given to other Death Eaters, farce though those trials might have been. It almost seems as though someone intervened to prevent that trial, and Dumbledore would have had cause to do so given the bond of blood discussion that we just had. But the reason why I don't believe this to be the case is the same reason why I don't believe Dumbledore would have visited Sirius in Azkaban himself to investigate the legitimacy of Sirius's innocence. There was no reason on Earth to believe that he was innocent. Most other Death Eaters were not caught in the act, because if they were typically killed by Aurors. They were mostly brought in based on the betraying tips of other Death Eaters like Karkaroff. Witnesses of other Death Eaters' wrongdoings were less numerous and less reliable, providing a reason for there to be trials for them. With Sirius, however, an entire crowd of Muggles told the exact same story. Sirius Black exploded Peter Pettigrew with some kind of magical spell, and then he just laughed about it. There was no gray area to be had. On top of that, Sirius has never denied that he had killed Peter, nor that he was guilty of the death of Lily and James, because in his mind, he was guilty. Why would anyone give him a trial? And brilliant though Dumbledore was, he had absolutely no reason to question Sirius's guilt. It was obvious that he was guilty, even though he wasn't. I like this particular dark theory because it attempts to display Dumbledore's cold, tactical indifference for others at times under the banner of for the greater good, a dogma that I don't believe he ever truly discarded, but I don't give it much credence. The evidence I would like to discuss is the treatment of Sirius Black after his escape from Azkaban. Sirius is forced to fly away from Hogwarts on the back of Buckbeak in order to avoid capture by the Dementors, and this is the one single plan I agree with. Sirius's escape serves the purpose of moving Buckbeak to a safe location, and Dementors would now likely know to be aware of Sirius's aura as a dog. This means that even though Sirius could turn into a dog, his disguise that worked once against the Dementors is probably now no good. They would know to look for his particular soul signature, or whatever you would call it. But here's the argument that I want to make today. No one else has that ability. We learn in Book 5 that Peter's return to Voldemort means, among many other things, that the bad guys know that Sirius can turn into a dog, and more or less what the dog form looks like. I would like to argue that that information is pretty meaningless. If a large black fuzzy dog is seen with Harry or Dumbledore or another member of the Order, from the Death Eater's perspective, oh yeah, that's obviously Sirius Black. But out in the wild, on his own, big ol' fuzzy black dogs are not that uncommon. Are Death Eaters just walking around London throwing Avada Kedavras at any dogs they see that vaguely fit that description? Are they just raid wiping dog parks? Does Voldemort have a squad of Death Eaters that he can just send willy-nilly out all across Great Britain on dog murder squad? In Book 5, we know that Voldemort is keeping a low profile, and people zapping other people's pets in the street is not exactly a low profile. I entirely reject the idea that Sirius's disguise as a dog is useless. It's utter nonsense, bordering on cruel, when we know how badly Sirius feels about his meager contribution to the Order. In Book 4, Sirius could have gone back to stay in his home, but he chose not to because he would rather live in the caves that Dumbledore offered, eating rats, than sit in the childhood home that he loathed. But that's where you stick him anyway, 24/7? Because there might be a Death Eater that wants to entirely go against Voldemort's down low orders to kill a random dog that kinda seems like it could be Sirius, and the Order needs an HQ? I'm sorry, that's nothing short of heartless. Sirius did not need to be trapped there full time. This is also not to mention the fact that Sirius is easily one of the Order's heaviest hitters. Let's discuss Sirius's credentials. During Sirius's evasion from the Ministry in Book 3, Fudge admits that only Ministry-trained hit wizards would have stood a chance against Sirius, explaining why it was so foolish for Peter to have attempted to bring him in. Fudge loathes Sirius, and yet we see him begrudgingly forced to acknowledge his prowess. I think this is the first piece of strong evidence for Sirius's competency. Second, we know of Sirius's fondness for fighting. In early parts of Book 5, Sirius mildly irritates Harry by expressing jealousy over his battle with the Dementors. If a person wasn't highly competent in dueling and battling magical creatures, why would they long for it? We can also assume Sirius got plenty of dueling practice while being friends with James Potter. The two were inseparable troublemakers, both of which seem to be regularly stirring up fights with, at the very least, Severus Snape. Harry is told that Snape knew more about the dark arts before coming to Hogwarts than most NEWT students, on top of the fact that we know him to be a supreme duelist due to his skill and legitimacy. If Sirius is more than keen to step to Snape, he's either a blibbering fool, which I don't believe he is because he isn't otherwise portrayed that way, or he's a person who could stand a chance against him. To be fair, I don't think Sirius would beat Snape, but I do think he could give him a run for his money. We see this skill on full display in the Battle of the Department of Mysteries at the end of Book 5, with Sirius successfully battling with numerous other Death Eaters. Sirius even goes toe-to-toe with Bellatrix Lestrange, widely thought to be one of Voldemort's most powerful lieutenants, and to me, it's always felt like he was defeated by her mostly due to his own overconfidence, as up until the point that she delivers the killing curse, she seems to be on the back foot in the description given. As an aside, in a poetic way, I believe the same sort of overconfidence is the same reason why Bellatrix is slain by Molly Weasley, but I digress. My thoughts are this. Dumbledore kept Sirius cooped up because he knew he couldn't predict him. Sirius is portrayed as powerful but impulsive, Hermione pointing this out, often much to Harry's irritation. With James gone, Sirius is a wild dog with no master, which is part of what makes him such an interesting character. For Berserk fans out there, Sirius is kind of just guts without the initial direction and tutelage of Griffith. He could have gotten that from James, but before Sirius could learn from him, he found his best friend gone, and then he was betrayed by one of the few people in the world he trusted in the form of Peter Pettigrew. In short, Sirius never had a real chance to grow up. Dumbledore trusts people like Hagrid because he knows exactly how Hagrid will and won't slip up with the information he gives him. Hagrid is predictable that way. Sirius is too intelligent and too immature, which is a combination that Dumbledore feels he can't risk setting loose. Dumbledore makes very few mistakes, and this is definitely one of them. Why do I say that?
Because Sirius is a Hufflepuff.
I'm gonna die! I'm gonna die rather than betray my friends!
And that right there is what you'll never understand, Dumbledore. You idiot. Who are your friends, huh? Nicholas Flamel, an old skeleton rattling around?
Eat a steak, stick man!
Who else? Alpheus Doge? When's the last time you invited him over? We never see him in the story until your funeral, where he shows up to defend you against Rita Skeeter, Aunt Muriel, and everyone else. Screw you. All right. Maybe I got a little hot under the collar there, but seriously, you couldn't have Sirius go stay with Hagrid? He's already got a pet dog. He can just have another one. Or how about you, Dumbledore? You could have a pet dog. He could follow you around. He could help you with whatever you're doing. Molly would breathe easier because Ron, the twins, and Harry have a second person that's there just kind of watching out for them. It's a perfect plan, Dumbledore. But no, you leave him miserable, just rotting in the house where he grew up, where he was miserable. Sirius was only happy while he was at Hogwarts. His life sucks, just so you know. And that's where you're gonna leave him? And why? So he can feed Buckbeak? Buckbeak shouldn't even be there. No one remembers that Buckbeak was supposed to die. The only people who remember that Buckbeak is still alive are you, Hagrid, the Golden Trio, and like Sirius. No one is out looking for, I'm sorry, Buckbeak Witherwings. I should have used the right name. No one cares. Or why else? So that he can be Secret Keeper? Anyone else can be Secret Keeper. The entire Order of the Phoenix is there. Molly, Arthur Weasley, literally anyone. Either way, Dumbledore doesn't value Sirius. That's the hill I'm dying on today. And it's to everyone's detriment. I'm sorry. I've been Riley. This has been Magical Theory. I'm pissed off. Have a magical day. I wonder how many thumbs down that Berserk comparison is gonna get me. Oops.